I'm Dr. Kelly Brogan. You may know me as a New York Times bestselling author of a book with an exploding pill on the cover, renegade psychiatrist, pole dancer, or honorary member of the Disinformation Dozen. What can I say? I'm a born provocateur. I've spent most of my recent life exposing deceptions, connecting dots, and discovering the secret places my inner victim is still waiting to be liberated. And now I feel called to help you reclaim all of your parts, your health, your sexuality, your power, and your expression, so that you can finally truly own yourself. I want to ignite in you that inner knowing and the pulsing vitality that lives beneath your disempowerment, disconnection, and resentment, so that you can audaciously, courageously, and playfully alchemize your struggle into the specific pleasure of who you are. This is Reclamation Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Reclamation Radio. I am Dr. Kelly Brogan, and I am here with the lovely Emily Fletcher. She's founder of Ziva Meditation. I know probably all of you have heard of it. Interestingly, when I met her, I was the only one who hadn't. All of my girlfriends are like huge fans of yours. And I came on your podcast and we had such almost like a psychedelic experience together in that podcast. And we could tell many tales about the meta, experience of it. But I met you first just as a woman, right? Like just energetically, I didn't know about your work. This is pretty typical for me when I show up as a guest. And I subsequently bought your program, did it, and then had the pleasure of being in one of your containers again, which we'll talk about. And I want to start out with, just a little bit about you as a woman, because which I don't normally do. I don't normally do this like, oh, tell me about yourself thing, because I find that to be like a little bit like filler in a podcast.
Like, I have 3 degrees and I'm an expert in many things. Just let me help people. And you're like, no, what do you about your childhood?
Your story is so fascinating, and it's so relevant to what the experience is of being in your presence, because you have a very particular kind of energy. And whether I was, being interviewed by you, learning from you, like in a pedagogical setting in your program, or most recently in Miami at one of your events, you have a very powerful presence and command. And I think a lot of it has to do with, what you may have cultivated in your time on stage. And so I would love to just share with people, because it's such an interesting tidbit about your history, a bit about how you see your heroine's journey, like how you see your trajectory. And I know you're kind of in it at the moment. So I'm tapping you for this story at a time where it may be hard to zoom out, but I'd love to just share a little bit before we dive into, what's alive for you now.
Yeah, I love that you called it the heroine's journey, because I recently have understood the distinguish between the hero's journey being external. What can we accomplish in the outside world? And the heroine's journey is what can we feel and heal and reclaim in the internal landscape? And so it feels like what's happening right now is this merger, is this marriage of this masculine performance, this masculine accomplishment, which we need to survive and to be successful humans, and this deep internal feeling and alignment and magnetism and a reclamation of my eros for myself. And now it feels like they are merging in a way that is really potent medicine for myself. And it feels like what nature is asking me to be the transmission of. And I think it is that masculine and feminine combination that makes you more magnetic. But to answer your question about like why I love teaching so much, why I love being on a stage, is that I used to be on Broadway for about 10 years. And it's what I wanted to do since I was a little girl. Like, I think 4th grade, I saw my first Broadway show, weeping tears, just knowing that this is what I was going to do with my life. And got to New York, moved here when I was 21. 3 weeks later, September 11th happened. But I had luckily already booked a show. So I got my show, my first job was a national tour, and it played Radio City Music Hall. So I was gone when I was here when September 11th happened, but I was gone when Broadway shut down. So anyway, this is a long and winding tale, but 10 years of singing and dancing and acting on Broadway. But 3 weeks after my Broadway debut was the saddest I had ever been. And so I had the great gift of learning at 22 years old that I was more interested in the happiness of pursuit than I was the pursuit of happiness. right? Because I've been very much in this idea of I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when.
Right. Which are very masculine, right? Like the chase, the capture, it's a drive that you're referencing. For many of us women, we're enculturated around that.
And I was with my lineage, like the women in my family are the breadwinners, they are the primary caretakers. And I used to think that that was masculine. But now I'm learning that that might be the wounded feminine, where it's this like overcompensating, this overholding that turns into martyrdom or brittleness. And so that is the thing I am working very. Oh no, let's be clear about my words. Just working so hard to soften, which is true. And then I catch myself and I'm like, butter, Emily. Imagine your nervous system is like butter, and I'm like, how much fun can I have through this death portal? Oh, so anyway, long story short, I spent 10 years on Broadway thinking I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when. And then finally I learned to meditate. And this particular style of meditation cured my insomnia on the first day. I've been suffering from debilitating insomnia for 18 months. I was going gray at 27. I was getting sick. I was getting injured. And I was very confused why I was living my dream and miserable. You know, I'd done the external thing, right? Like I got it. And so I learned to meditate. And it was the first time I was like, oh, I'm not a seeker anymore. I found it. The thing I was looking for actually is inside of me. Turns out that the kingdom heaven is within. Turned out Rumi was right. Like what you seek is in you. But it wasn't until I learned meditation that I was able to have that visceral experience for myself. Because it's one thing to know that intellectually. It's very different to experience that viscerally. And so then I learned meditation and I was like, wait a minute, why isn't everyone doing this? That's not just the name of my podcast. Like it's genuinely, when I find something that works, I'm like, like I can't help but, shout it from the rooftop. So left Broadway, went to India, trained for 3 years to be a teacher, and then started Ziva Meditation, which is the name of my company, and have been teaching ever since. I've taught over like 60,000 people now. And when I say taught, I mean like 60,000 people have a daily meditation practice that they do twice a day on their own, like as a direct result of my teachings, which I feel really, really proud of. And we made the world's first online meditation training back in 2013. So like as a Broadway showgirl, they like tap danced for a living to like make the world's first online meditation training. I also feel really proud of. And then it got like, even that got kind of masculine. Like I used to joke that I was like the world's most competitive meditation teacher, which yes, you can make meditation competitive. And I was just, like using all these skills that I had from Broadway and sort of being this bridge between science and spirit and teaching at Google and Harvard and Apple. And it was all amazing. And I was married and had a child and had a multi-7-figure business. And I was like living the dream. And then 2020 happened and the whole world shifted. And I feel like what happened in 2020, I mean, a lot of things happened, but one of the things that I felt the most was this shift from this hyper-masculine, externally focused society into one of more like, what are my priorities? What is important to me? More alignment, more magnetism, more time in nature. Like so many of my friends are like, I want to be in nature. I want to be in nature. I have like 8 friends starting communes and farms in Costa Rica. So it just felt like everybody got the same message at the same time. And it was like more time in nature, more alignment with your time and your priorities, which feels more feminine, right? It's more of like an internal checking in versus how many zeros in the bank account. So I was no exception. My focus started to go internal. I went through a divorce, and 3 weeks later, nature started like fire hosing me with this PhD in sacred sexuality. I met Layla Martin, who's now my best friend. I met this beautiful cosmic love named Adam. I moved in with Regina Thomashower, aka Mama Gina, and we have lived together in amazing bliss for the last 4 years. And so it just felt like I kept getting all these initiations, all these gifts, all these tools, which was a lovely thing to receive for me personally, but it felt like it was bigger than that. Nature was like, hey, you know that thing you did for meditation? You know how you helped to make it accessible and attractive to a mainstream audience? Well, now we need you to do that for these even more potent and even more taboo tools, because the world is getting more intense. The world, I would argue, is getting more filled with fear and sickness and separation. And I really believe that the only antidote to fear is love. And as cheesy as that might sound, and as Miss America as that might sound, I was in fact Florida's Junior Miss in 1997. So I feel like I have the right to say that the more fear we have on the planet, the more love we need to bring. And so I've been spending the past 4 years birthing, refining, researching, developing this new modality. And I think this is the first podcast I'm ever mentioning the name on. But so this new modality is being birthed, and it's called Ziva Magic. And while I used to really judge magic and I used to really judge miracles, I have since changed my tune. And I really believe in the Einstein quote that you can either live your life like everything is a miracle or nothing is. I mean, I'm that's not a direct quote, but I think it's the other way around.
But he probably didn't say it either. So
You think you probably did it?
burn it.
Anyway, so I'm just choosing to believe that life is magical. And it turns out that the more that I believe that, the more magic happens in my life. And so what I've been doing is basically taking embodied manifesting tools and combining it with meditation and teaching people how to visualize, alchemize, and magnetize the life of their wildest imagination. And that sounds really great because it is. And it requires all of you. I'm learning that like if you are going to have the audacity to birth something called magic, you're going to have to be willing to surrender anything in your life that isn't almost, anything in your life that is not in fact magic. And so like, while I'm saying this because if I'm talking to the skeptic in me 5 years ago, I would just want to hear that like, oh, it's also work. Do you know what I mean? Like, yes, it's magical, but there is also a level of work that is required of you to vibrate at the frequency of magic. So there's my sort of esoteric and hippy dippy story.
I love it. And, we were chatting a bit before we started. The trajectory that I've been on, even just professionally, is so similar, right? So this focus on the discipline associated with lifestyle medicine and the initiation therein, like when you show up for yourself, there is this, whether you want to call it, paternal, or I like to call it self-husbanding, there is an energy that says, I've got you. I'm here finally, right? Like your system can start to exhale. And it comes from the commitment and the exercising of discipline. I heard from Marion Woodman, when one of her books, she's a Jungian analyst, and she talks about the apparently etymology of discipline is the gaze of the teacher that loves you. And, that's it. That's why I love discipline. That's why discipline has changed the course of my own embodiment trajectory. And there comes a point, as you referenced with even the like competitive meditating vibe, there comes a point where that can overstay its rigid welcome, right? Where a focus on the dogmatism of self-care, self-commitment, and these practices without the engagement of this body as an alchemical vessel, it's like you're missing out on the real show you came to watch, right? As a woman. And so, I see your trajectory is so similar to mine professionally. It's pretty cool.
I know we're also like almost the exact same age. And when we met, I was just like, oh, actually, I think you came onto my radar right when you were in like this word reclamation. This word reclamation was coming out of the Reclamation Radio and the Reclaim Blood. You hadn't announced the title of the book yet, but I was in the works of making this event called Reclaim. And we had like 18,000 people show up. And I was like, wait, who is this woman? I would listen to your videos and watch you pole dancing. And I was just like, yes, like she gets it. And it's just so fun when you find someone that's like vibrating at a similar frequency. And it felt like we were getting similar downloads at similar times.
Absolutely. And even in our interview on your podcast, I heard you use the word eros in a way that I hadn't heard others sort of like bandying it about. And so I want to dive in there and talk a bit about, which I feel is a shared perspective, but how you think about eros, sexual energy. Is it a very specific thing that you activate, in these more sexualized, hedonistic, pleasure-based, erotic experiences? Do you think of it more generally? Like, how do you even use that word? And then how has that concept, you talked about all of these women you magnetize to your field who are very erotically, in the classical, even conventional sense, erotically oriented. But I know that you use the word even, in a broader sense. I'd love to hear a bit about how you feel it ties in with what you access through meditation even.
If we bring it back to like this whole conversation of the chapters of our lives, and I think so many, yes, you and I are very, I think, intense examples of it, but I think many people can relate to like pre-2020 or just like their 20s or 30s, even early 40s, like external, like the masculine. And to me, meditation to some degree is masculine in that you're bringing your awareness up, you're transcending, you're like going to God. There's an acceptance of what is, there's a discipline of getting your buns to the chair. There is the like the structure of the masculine meditation. And I think that meditation is a beautiful foundation for any sort of tantric work or erotic work because it creates neuroplasticity, because it creates the ability for the brain to change, because the stress, makes us more rigid. So anyway, this masculine then coupled with the feminine of going into the body. And what am I feeling? What are my emotions? How does this want to be expressed through my body right now? And then when you combine those two, the external and the internal, the masculine and the feminine, you end up with this polarity. You end up with this magnetism. And that is actually how I would describe Eros, as the force that magnetizes the universe together. So just like a lover is attracted to another lover, that's one expression of Eros. But that magnetism can be applied to anything. And that's the thing that really lights me up about this work. Like, I'm not looking to be anybody's tantra expert. I'm not looking to be anyone's sex expert. To me, this sexual energy, this erotic energy is a tool and a pathway to the divine. And this is what lights me up about this work, is that actually the deeper I go into it, the more similar I see it to be as meditation, because they both can be transcendent. Like, the modalities that I work in are meditation, pleasure, and medicine. And by medicine, I mean more of the psychedelic variety. And so to me, what they all three have in common is they're allowing you to die before you die. Right? Like in meditation, you're transcending individuality and connecting to totality. In sexuality, like in orgasmic states, in French, it's called le petit mort, right? The little death. And when you're in that post-orgasmic, ecstatic peak state, you are not Kelly. I am not Emily. We just are. You get to experience that unity consciousness, that everythingness. And then also in some medicine journeys, you can sort of transcend the individuality and connect to something bigger than us. And so for me, I'm very interested in giving us windows to expand. It's like we're building the muscle of expansion so that when we come back into our sober states, like we do all of this stuff for me, like from my point of view, to get better at life. Right? Like we meditate to get better at life. We practice and dance with our erotic energy to get better at life. We do medicine journeys to get better at life, not for the sake of doing any of it, right? Like if you just do medicine journeys all the time, what is the point? If you're just dancing around in your Eros all the time and never sharing that joy and that life force energy with anyone else, then what is the point? If you're meditating in the cave all the time, then what is the point? Like we are householders, right? If you're listening to this podcast on your iPhone, you are a householder. You're not a monk. And so we've been gifted these tools, and I think our job is to take them and to turn up the dial on our own divinity. And I would say that right now is my big North Star. How do I give people the tools to help them turn up the dial on their own divinity?
This is such a beautiful phrase. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think what I came upon as somebody who not only was not interested in the role of sex, sexuality, sexual trauma. Just imagine as a psychiatrist, I mean, that was not relevant because I was so focused in my training on psychopharmacology and, these fictitious concepts neurons and bubbles moving across these synapses, like all of this mechanical universe. And then in finding myself through my own personal journey, touching upon the shame gated caverns of my own vital force, right? Like seeing that you can get so healthy, you can get healthy to a point, and there's no amount, in my humble opinion, of meditating, sun gazing, supplement taking, ice bathing. There's no amount of plant medicine even that can bring you to the place of feeling alive on a daily basis. And that this aliveness is what we're after, right? Like it's not having a stable mood. It's, not our symptoms disappearing. Yes, it is that. And there is an experience of a fuller vitality, a fuller aliveness that we perhaps came here to reclaim, right? Like we came from this and through this creative energy. We incarnated through sex, right? And we forget that. We forget the relevance. We think it's just something we do with our partner when we have one in the bedroom, right? So
but only if you want to procreate with a child, and only male, female, and only a missionary position, and all of these rules.
Yeah. So, what I had the pleasure of experiencing with you in Miami when you came to, there was a private, that I was invited to because of you. So grown up, having no idea, what to expect. And it was so resonant with everything that I've come to value, which is this concept of working with, I would say specifically a female body, although there were certainly men and women there, as an alchemical vessel. Like, what does that mean? So I experienced it. I experience it, through and came upon such similar principles through my own journey. So I'd love for you to just talk to the people about what emotional alchemy means to you, because it's certainly a phrase we could, invoke without really grounding it in real experience, real practice, let alone like real results. Like, is this something even that is results oriented? Like, how would we know if we're doing it? How would we know if we're doing it well? And I think that's what you led a lot of us through, that and more, I would say, in this experience. So let's just start there. Like, what is emotional alchemy to you, and why is it something that you've come to value as much as, meditation and mindfulness?
First of all, it meant so much to me that you showed up that day, and it felt such an honor to share this experience with you, because I know how much work and time and care and thought you've put into your own journey, and you've helped so many people reclaim their bodies and their arrows for themselves. So thank you. I'll say that right now, as I'm going through a lot of change, a move, Regina and I are, not living together. I'm going through a breakup. I'm leaving New York City. Like, it's a lot of death right now. And I imagine, all of us have been through challenging times in our life. And right now, I'm so disinterested in talking to people or having people like try and hold space for me who do not know how. And I used to hate the term hold space, but now I kind of know what it means. But for people who don't know how to hold space for themselves, I cannot share with them the intensity of what I'm moving through right now, because my nervous system doesn't feel safe. I'm like, you're going to try and fix this. You're going to try and gloss over this. You're going to try and make it better. And right now, I just want to be witnessed in the grief of the things that are shedding. And so right now, I'm getting a whole new window into why I love this work so much, is because me 5 years ago would not have been able to hold space for me right now. Because I would have been like, you're fine. How about this? Have you tried this? Like, I would have just been throwing solutions versus listening, feeling, and just allowing someone to be witnessed in the bigness of their feelings. And I think that this one skill of like allowing yourself to witness yourself in the bigness of your feelings, be it ecstasy or rage or sorrow or whatever is true for you. If you can do that for yourself, you are going to be a better parent. You're going to be a better sibling. You're going to be a better child. You're going to be a better partner. You're going to be a better boss. Like, whatever you're doing in your life, if you have the ability to hold space for yourself and then therefore for others, people feel safe around you. People trust you. People will be vulnerable with you. And then from that, there's a level of intimacy and trust that is created that I think is what people are desperately missing. One of the things that people are desperately missing right now.
I've been on a journey of maturing my inner masculine and feminine, and I've needed all of the energetic support I can get. I have been using one of my favorite resources, which is Lotus Way, flower elixirs, mists, and oils. I use one called True Strength, which smells amazing, to support my self-containment as a professional and as a mama, and Wild Abundance to support my, wild abundance. And I'm a scent girly, so the pleasure of these scents is so amazing every single day. If you want to customize your sensory and energetic support, head to lotusway.com and use the code Kelly15 for 15% off. The link is in show notes for you. Click on this, Emily, before you hold your thought, because this is, to me, it is extraordinary that we have arrived at exactly the same conclusion, which is that safety. You use that word, right? So the safety that we long for, and again, I'll say specifically as women, is within our capacity to cultivate. And that doesn't mean you're an automaton on your own and you got to be like your own island and be even more self-sufficient than you've been programmed to be. It simply means that your capacity for emotional self-regulation is the bridge to connection, love, and intimacy. That comes first. And again, I invoke this idea of what would this devoted husband caring for me do for me, offer me? How would he create the conditions for me to experience that exhale in my system? I sort of play, in the imagining of that. And I have recognized that practices like meditation and spin-offs of these, again, I would characterize more masculine, contemplative, consciousness-oriented practices, are how you strengthen that container for the access to this inner energetic realm. I mean, it's exactly what I've come to. That has to come first, because otherwise we're expecting other people to offer that to us, right? So like my teenage daughter, my eldest, is learning how to drive. Okay. And as a single mom, there are going to be weeks where she's practicing with me, right? Like there's not a man. To me, this is like a man's job. Like, what the fuck am I doing? Like
Dad's telling me how to drive.
I barely know how to do it myself. Whatever. So I have lost my cool on many an occasion. She's doing great. Like she's a great driver. And we joke because like, I'll be like in the passenger seat, like gripping her arm, like, no, you're too close to the edge. Like, be careful. What are you doing? Right. So I'm like that woman, in the car with her and totally dysregulated. The other day, I actually owned it. And I was like, listen, I am going to do a better job regulating myself in your presence. Like you're doing fantastic and I can do better.
Oh, how did she respond to that?
What she said, she's like, Mama, her dad is super chill, right? So she's like, Mama, if he can do it, you can do it too. Meaning like, you can get there in the self-regulation department. And she also gets, that it's like not personal to her, but it's fucking unpleasant for her to like have this experience, but the vulnerability of being driven, I often like point out to married women, this is where you'll see how much you are choosing to trust your man is like how much you can shut up in the passenger seat, right? And just let him.
Coached me on this because when you were on my podcast, I was driving with my ex and we had a whole situation. And it was like, in hindsight, you were like, yeah, I mean, this is a conversation for another time, but I was not keeping my mouth shut. But it was indicating that like, either I did not yet have the tools to regulate my own nervous system and find that safety within myself, or, there's other options as well. But anyway, I love that you were coaching me. You're like, I give you a D-.
I remember. So it's like but that is so what do I do with that responsibility that I have for my own self-regulation, which simply means choosing to be with myself in that moment, rather than self-abandoning and imagining that in this instance, my daughter has to change something in order for me to feel okay. That is the root of dysfunctional parenting, right? Let alone
everybody else go to therapy and then I won't have to go to therapy, or everyone else get healthy and then I'll be fine.
I'll feel fine. So you have come to understand that there is access that you have to your own inner magic when you can prioritize this relationship to what you're feeling, which is succinctly said as choosing to be with.
Choosing to be with, but I'd say it's bigger than that as well. Not bigger, but the thing is, if you're triggered, like in that moment in the car with your daughter, when you're having the fight with your partner, when your boss is criticizing the project that you spent all weekend working on, it's very challenging to use that moment to be like, I'm going to be with myself. I'm going to really feel these feelings. Like you don't train for battle in battle. Right? It's like you need to get strong. Navy SEALs are training before they ever go into war. And so similarly, like softening, I would say in this day and age, to feel your feelings, something that most of us have been explicitly trained out of since the moment we came out of the womb, right? From the moment we were birthed, it's like, shh, don't cry. Don't cry. You're fine. You're okay. Have a bottle, have a blankie, have an iPad, have some booze, have some pills. But don't feel, have some porn, but don't feel, right? We've been trained explicitly, beautifully to not feel our feelings. We've been shamed out of it. We've been told that it's weak, that it's going to make you a pussy, that it's going to make you don't cry like a girl. Like all of this stuff is programmed into us that we think that our feelings somehow make us weak when nothing could be further from the truth. And I think we have been waiting until the stakes are high and waiting until you're in that. Let's go to the gym. Let's get strong. Let's get tools and safety and practices to where we can get good at feeling. And I would say even more importantly, moving those emotions so that when you're in a death portal, so that when someone dies, so that when you're in the breakup, you are practiced at grieving. You are practiced at celebrating. And what I have found is that how this relates to Eros and therefore your magnetism and magic is like, good luck feeling the full power of your ecstasy if you spent 4 decades numbing the power of your pain. It's just like, it's not possible. So I think to answer your question of like how this all works, I think the system is really simple and I'm really proud of the simplicity of it. So what I teach in Ziva Magic is I teach people to visualize, alchemize, and magnetize. So I'm framing all of this work as manifesting, as embodied manifesting, right? Because for years I taught manifesting from the neck up, and it works. Thoughts become things. What you put your attention on grows. We can kind of like think our way and intellect our way into things and muscle our way into a reality that we choose. And I just think it's a lot faster, a lot more fun, a lot more flowy and easy when you bring your whole body into the equation. So what I teach people to do is teach people to visualize, like, what is it that you would love? So we go into meditation, we get into coherence, we get head, heart, and hoo-ha, all into coherence with each other. Regina hates that I use the word hoo-ha, but I was like, well, we're talking to different audiences. I've got to be the bridge. I'm going to send them to you, right? I'm going to throw the net wide. I'm going to bring them to you, Regina.
Also like in their swag bag. Yeah.
Yeah. So head, heart, and hoo-ha into coherence. What would you love? And fascinatingly, I find so many people don't actually know what they want, because if we've been divorced from our physical desires and our physical pleasure, if you don't know what you want physically, it's very hard to name what you want for your career or financially or in your partner. And so this is another drop in the bucket for your pleasure really matters. You being in your body really matters, because the more you know what you want physically, the more you're going to be able to claim what you want in your life. So once people are clear on one thing they'd love to manifest, I have them to try that on, like get into the 5 senses reality of it. And then we go into the even scarier territory of what if it never comes? Why hasn't it come yet? Is there something wrong with me? So we go into like the scary, dark places of why it hasn't shown up. Because if you want it and you're an energetic match for it, law of attraction would say it's showing up. Maybe not how, maybe not when, but like it should show up. So why isn't it here? And then we get an opportunity to go into the sticky bits of like the protector parts, a little bit of IFS, like the piece of you that's raging and pissed that it hasn't shown up, the piece of you that's terrified that it may never show up. And then we move those. So that to me is emotional alchemy. Like, what is alive and how do I like name it, express it, and move it through my body? And then what I find is that there can be even a kernel of ecstasy in the expression of that feeling, because the truth feels good, right? Like expressing something, releasing something feels good. That's what most of BDSM is built on. It's like the cessation of pain creates dopamine and pleasure. And holding down your feelings is actually the thing that creates discomfort. And so having a safe container where the name of the game is like, throw the temper tantrum, cry like the baby, rage, punch the pillow, like all the things that you've been told not to do. Well, here's a safe space and some great music to just let it effing rip. And then we find those little kernels of pleasure in the expression, and then we fan those flames. And the kernels of ecstasy then become the alchemical force, right? That pleasure that comes from the expression then alchemizes those fears into fuel for the dream. So we've got visualize, alchemize. And then once that alchemy has cleared the channel, then we start to magnetize. So I give people tools to start to curate and cultivate what I call creation energy, right? Which is eros, which is life force, which is pleasure. And it's the same force, like you were saying, that creates a baby. It's the most divine thing that we can do as a human, right? Is create another human. And yet we've somehow managed to allow ourselves to be conditioned into thinking that this is wrong, that it's bad, that it's a sin, that it's from the devil, when actually I think it is the most holy force that we have been gifted as humans. And that's why I think this work is so potent. And that's why I think that so many of us are getting the call to bring these tools into the zeitgeist and to take them out of the shadows, because I do think that it's going to require that potency of medicine. And the good news is that nature's already installed it inside of us, right? Like we already have access to these chemicals inside of us. So I help people to cultivate and curate their pleasure to increase their magnetism. So fun fact, and you can totally fact check me on this, because nobody loves soft science more than a meditation teacher. But I've heard that your electromagnetic field of your heart is 5,000 times more powerful than your head. So let's just assume, let's say even if it's 500, right? Like even if the number is wrong, like it doesn't really matter. It's larger. The electromagnetic field of your heart is stronger than that of your head. So imagine just head and heart. So if we get our head and our hearts in coherence with each other and pointed towards the same goal, there's power in that. Now imagine bringing your hoo-ha into the party, right? Imagine turning on the generator of your body, turning on the magnet of your body, and allowing that erotic force, that magnetic force, to start to supercharge your dreams. And so what we do is we use this erotic force through breath, through energy. And what we're doing inside of Ziva Magic is just breath and energy. And we allow people to access these beautiful ecstatic states. And then from that place of safety, from that place of magnetism, from that place of joy, you drop back into the visualization. You drop back into the dream and you feel it as if it's already done. And what that does is it allows your body to feel safe inside of the dream, because your brain does not know the difference between a real memory and an imagined one. And I would argue that if you're having this desire, it is because nature is cueing you. Like nature wants to make it so. And so when this opportunity comes, which it will, your nervous system will then greet this opportunity like a long lost lover, like safety, instead of like, oh no, this is the opportunity that's going to make or break my career. And so the self-sabotage falls away, the deserving power increases. And it's not magic, but it does start to feel like magic, the way that like the specificity of the dreams start to show up. Like right now I'm moving and I've been calling in support. Like I'm moving to a place where I don't have any friends or family, with a child, like by myself into the suburbs. Like on paper, it's my worst nightmare. And I've been saying out loud to my coaches, to my therapists, like what I desire as far as support. And on the 8th, on the Lionsgate 8/8, I got an email from a woman who was like, hey, I heard you ask for help on your last bliss activation. And like basically verbatim, every single line was like everything I've been calling in. And she wants to bring an ice bath. She wants to like come and support me. And she's bringing an ice bath, which I was searching for an ice bath at the time that I got the email from her. So it was just like fun little magic. And then once you program the filtration device of your brain, once you program the reticular activating system, which is the filtration device of the brain, to look for magic, you then use your recency bias and the confirmation bias of the brain to start to prove that magic is real. And I feel like we've got billions of neurons up here. We might as well be using them to prove to ourselves that magic is real versus proving to ourselves that we live in a dystopian society that's just going straight into the hell in a handbasket. It's like,
which itself, is an erotic charge, right? Like take it from, a career activist. It's very enlivening, not to the extent that we are talking about, not to the ecstatic range, but it is enlivening to be in that negative bias, right? To be in that fear mongering sort of like scanning for the perpetrator. And what I hear you suggesting, which of course I agree with, is that, if we take the palette, the menu of emotional energies, and we say, I want them all, right? Like I am not going to, filter any out. Then you get to draw from that experience of saying yes to whatever emotions you mentioned, right? Like the rage, the fear happen to be present or easily activated. And you get to allow those to transmute into this ecstatic wavelength, right? For lack of a better word. And from that place, in the right conditions, you can start to acclimate your body to that level of expansion, right? Because obviously everybody knows, about the lottery winners who lose all the money, right? Like this concept of havingness, this ceiling on the joy, the ecstasy, the bliss, so we can actually capacitate, like I have written, similar sentiments like that. It's like, we think we want to have these joyful lives. And then we have like one moment of ecstasy and we can barely hold it for like literally 10 seconds. Right. So what you're talking about is, which I love, is like when the thing comes, how much better a receptacle can you be, to hold what you imagined would accompany the acquisition of the thing. Right. Like, because otherwise we're just in this fetishized like disappointment cycle, right?
Seeking. Otherwise, it is the I'll be happy when syndrome and sort of like addicted to the angst of not having it, which I would argue that stress is the space between where you are and where you think you should be. And so that you're just proliferating that versus this tool, these modalities, like in the emotional alchemy, in the alchemize, you're practicing your capacity to hold space for yourself, to hold that pain. And that same capacity will be able to hold your pleasure. And as you practice that in these safe containers, like moving through a course with a community, then in life, when you get the opportunity, when you meet the person or the devastation happens, like you have that container that you can hold for yourself. And then you trust yourself to be able to receive, like you said, that joy. And like, I'm really good, for example, at making money. I have recently learned that I'm not so good at having or growing money. And like, they're different skills.
Yes. Oh, yes. I've been there. Yep.
And so I'm like, oh, right. I have to grow my capacity to have money and to let that money grow, different skills. And so similarly, like some people are like, oh, I'm really good at having feelings, like having life experiences. But it's like, can you hold those? Can you feel those life experiences? And then can you like receive the joy and pleasure that comes from them or integrate the lessons? Like they're different skills.
How important do you think it is for us to do this kind of work in group settings versus like on your own?
I think, look, I'm a Broadway baby. Like put me on a stage, put me in a group retreat. Like, I love humans. I'm an extrovert. I'm a double Aries. Like I love humans. I'm an exhibitionist. Like, I literally have fantasies of like, I want to have stadiums filled with people orgasming at the same time, holding a shared prayer for the species. Like I want to activate the sacred sites and have 100,000 people orgasming in front of the pyramid. So like I love a group.
Get manifesting.
I love a group. And I have spent the last 4 years like working on this modality and just recently shot an online course because I know that not everyone feels comfortable yet to go on a retreat or to do this work in person, that it does for them need to start private. It needs to start in a safe environment. It needs to start at home. And so what we just did is we shot this, I'm going to call it a course, but it feels so much bigger than that because we had 15 people flying from all around the world, like on their own dime, just because they wanted to be at the birthing of Ziva Magic. And so we basically created a retreat and then shot it like a documentary. And so the thing I'm so excited about is that even the people who take it from home and they're doing this solo in their home, they're going to have a group of people and seeing their trials, their tribulations, their fears, where they started, their blocks, so that there is a bit of communal element even baked into this online course that people will be probably doing solo unless they're doing it with a partner or a friend. So I think it just depends on what you're ready for and what feels safe to you. I know like so many people are dealing with sexual shame, sexual trauma, religious trauma. And so oftentimes like any sort of a like group thing can feel not safe for their nervous system. And I think to really have healing, you must first have safety. So I think it's just a matter of tuning into like, where am I on my journey? For me right now, yes, I want to take this online course. I want to learn these tools. And then maybe I'll take a retreat. Then maybe I'll go to one of Emily's crazy activations at the sacred sites. But step one is like safety and learning the tools yourself. I had the good fortune of learning these tools like in community and, at my birthday party and it was a real gift and with people that I felt very safe with and loved very much. And I know that not everyone is that's not like everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah. I can certainly see, both perspectives because to take responsibility for your own lived experience is always going to be a solo moment, right? Like you're referencing in those moments of trigger, the idea is not to run and find your like-minded friends so that you can experience the moment. The idea is this is your lived experience. Own it, be with it. And that's, unto yourself. And to have community and group experiences that normalize this approach to life that says every experience of adversity, challenge, every, as I would call it, upset is an alchemical opportunity, right? Not only does that really, pull, what's the drain? Like I'm like invoking a bathtub analogy or so. It starts to drain, the victim saturation that we're all enculturated in immediately, right? Because then there's like an excitement, there's a curiosity, there's a playfulness, there's a kind of mischievous energy that you bring to bear every time shit is not going the way you want it to, or your conscious mind says, right? So it's just a completely different way of living. And to have that normalized, to have other people around you, which personally I think is essential, to hold you so that you don't take the bait of collapsing into the familiar, so sad, I hate this sucks, poor me, range of human experience, which at a certain point just gets tedious, like it gets boring and it feels tired, right? So to expand, yeah, it does require.
I'm curious to know your thoughts on it, because to me it feels like a fine line of like, certainly we don't want to stay there. We don't want to stay in that victim mentality. It's not even the truth. And it can get so addictive that it just colors your whole reality. But where would you draw the line of, because one of the things I love about Ziva Magic and that I'm so inspired by with Regina and Layla is like the depth of their like sorrow. Like they are willing to go into the gutters, but they don't stay there. And so we've gotten really good, the three of us, of holding space for each other. Like, hey, can I purge? Hey, can I swamp? And we just like barf it out and like let the other one barf it out. And then magic happens, right? It's like, but if I don't let myself go into the victim story, and if I don't let myself feel it and name it and let someone else witness it, or even myself, sometimes I'll just do it into my voice note on my phone, right? But if I don't barf it out, then I'm like re-metabolizing that unfelt feeling. So I'm curious what your take is on that.
Yeah, this is a deep question. So I have been for many years accused of victim shaming, right? So like that I could see how I can hold a polarity that says blending with your victim is a problem, is a bad thing. Of course, that's not the full truth, right? Because I love that you invoke IFS and parts work. There is a part that is holding that narrative because it is a lifeline to the meeting of needs, right? Like if you take that narrative and all the associated feelings and all of the things that are secured because of that narrative, right? When I do the same thing with my girlfriends, I'll say like, listen, I just need to, let me complain, right? Like, let me vent. And I get their full attention, right? And if I weren't in this sort of culture, with my own friends, and I was in the dominant narrative that normalizes complaint as a currency of connection, there's so much that we get. There's so much that we get from that. And to just cut that is to deny, first of all, the existence, the validity, and the means by which that part has been meeting needs. And I feel like, and why I love these tools that you're bringing together, that catharsis is an extraordinary portal of access to aliveness, right? Because it's not so much that and I know you know this, like you're discharging, it's like you're getting rid of this, you're feeling what aliveness is carrying these different flavors, right? So that was one of my cardinal moments was when I was, in my breakup, divorce, and I was literally like snot coming down my face, like in grief for weeks on end in a fetal position. And I felt like a little bit of good, right? Like, because I'm so used to living, I had been like so used to living behind a glass wall, like in this kind of like automated version of a human woman where I just coast between, bitterness, irritability, and disappointment, and, some degree of basic
Martyrdom, maybe.
right. Right. So it's like a narrow band, from like content to like, fine, I'm okay, to, irritated. And that level of grief there was just something delicious about it, which was that aliveness, right? So the catharsis plays this role. And, I do believe we can also dance in a territory where it's almost like becomes instantaneous, the outcome over time. Like, I don't know, not that it's like a linear process or progression, but what really made me start to play with that idea is when I read Yolanda Norris Clark's book, Portal. And she's been a guest on here too. And she's an extraordinary birth keeper, I'll call her. And she talks about how, yeah, like I'll just use that word. That's not what.
Oh, was she the woman who has 10 kids?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, you introduced me to her. She's fascinating.
Yeah. She's a total powerhouse. And so she's had these blissful births in her later experiences. And she talks about how the moaning and the screaming and all of the catharsis, of course, that's modeled for us not only on, mainstream TV, but then even in my own births. I mean, I was like, I couldn't shut up the entire time. But she talks about how that kind of a discharge and catharsis can almost be a distraction from the deeper internal self presence. This is my language, that is available in these more like languid, pleasure-filled, permissive birthing states that are, she talks about how she's basically silent, for her later births. So there's subtlety, like everything, and nuance here. And I think practicing the catharsis for most of us is the first contact that we have with, I mean, I did Osho dynamic meditation for a year and a half during, the pandemic, like 2020, I would say. And it's a lot of catharsis, right? And the catharsis is, I mean, I would be screaming, like literally screaming for 15 minutes. And then it all is in preparation for meditation, right? So it's like you move all this energy and you feel this body that you're in with all of its associated currents. And then you're ready to be still, right? So it has this amazing role. And I think the practice of it and knowing when to draw on that tool versus when it might actually be a distraction or even a chasing of a certain kind of hit, is part of what we figure out, as we move along.
And I think you're right. Like that requires a level of mastery, right? And for most people, not everyone, but for most of us, we've been really good at repressing and I'm fine and don't worry about me. What do you need? And so like just as a step one to be like, what am I feeling? And to have safety to express that. And then, yes, I think that we move into, the emotional equivalent of like having a 10th birth, right? Like I certainly would not give the same advice to someone on their 10th birth as I would someone on their first. They're like, that's like your 10th ayahuasca sitting versus your first. And so I think for most people, we just need permission to feel. And I would say that after all my ayahuasca and silent retreats and 16 years of meditation and you name breath work, like you name it, I've done it. I keep coming back to this outrageously simple truth. And it is that feelings are meant for feeling.
Boom, I know.
Feelings are meant for feeling. They just want to be witnessed. They just want to be seen. And then that gets to be the fun game of like, does this want to be witnessed with my best friend? Does this want to be witnessed with 9-inch nails? Does this want to be witnessed in my voice note? Does this want to be witnessed, in community on a retreat? But like what we cannot afford to do anymore is pretend that we are not feeling, pretend that we don't have bodies, pretend that our sexual energy is anything other than holy, because that is literally killing us. And it is it's not even time for, we get to, right? It's like when I'm in these erotic spaces, I'm just so overwhelmed at the beauty and the divinity. And to me, like it feels sacred. It feels like church. It feels holy to me. And that is a thing that lights me up, right? It's like that I feel a little evangelical about just letting people know that this is available, that it is on the menu, that your sexuality could be a pathway to your own divinity. And then people can choose to follow that or not, right? Like, but just know that it's available. And then like when I'm in those spaces and I see what feels like the frequency of heaven on earth, and then I tune into everything that is not that on the planet, I'm like, wait a minute, like this could be so much more fun, everybody. Like, just so you know, like this is available. Like there's a couple clicks on the dial where the charge, like you said, like that erotic charge that we get from the suffering, we could just tune that on the dial into eros and celebration and reclamation. And so I feel like I am excited about this self-imposed mission that I've given myself. Maybe it's nature imposed or self-imposed, of at least letting people know that this is available. And then they can choose, like, do I want to continue to create hell on earth? Or am I interested in using the internal pharmacology that nature has installed in me to create my own version of heaven on earth? And what does that look like?
I love that. You are such an extraordinary ambassador of this work. And I would add, you hold a great container, right? So like this safety element, it is essential. And I don't throw that word around as just like some sort of qualifier for a high integrity experience. It's literally necessary in order for your body to move the energies in this way. And I think you have a very special ability to offer that. And probably is a result of, this journey that you've been on, cultivating your own energy and your realness. So I am so excited for what you're offering. I look forward to being in your containers myself in the future. And I
have a dream that you and I do an event together and we get like me and you and Kimmy Inch and like, we just like make a whole weekend of it.
Let's do it. Nothing is more fun for me than women gathering. It's just the best. It is the absolute best, as I know you know. I'm excited for this program, your meditation program. I literally was like, somewhat self-conscious about my own program. It's just so high level, so professional. And your oratory skills, like I'm here for it.
Kelly, I am blushing because I'm such a fan of the way that you articulate. You're such a genius. So the fact that you even did Ziva online is again
It's so good. It's so good. And you're like, oh, I'm sure you know all this. Yes. And it's a spiral path, right? Like circling back to the power of that kind of self-commitment. I mean, I will die on the hill that says it is a portal to your own power. So yeah, no.
Meditation.
I loved it. Yeah. And that's self-commitment, right? So like, that's why these programs matter. That's why like, don't buy a program and don't do it, right? Like just don't fucking do that.
Like make a promise to yourself and keep it, because that's what builds integrity.
That's where the magic comes in. It's like, it doesn't almost even, it's like secondary that it happens to be so well produced and amazing, because it's in the act of that self-commitment that you open up, these portals of access. So it's about what you're prioritizing, right? Like you're prioritizing your consciousness when you're doing a meditation program. And in this case, you're prioritizing your embodiment and your own orientation towards your feelings. I mean, it's so ridiculous how trite and silly and basic it is. And I've come to the same conclusion. Like learning how to, tell my daughters this, like learning how to feel feelings is all that matters. It's like literally.
It's really the beginning and the end. And it's so, what's silly to me is how that we would even need a course to help us do that. But in a world that we've been trained the opposite, I do think it's important that we have models, safety, tools, even silly little like phrases like well purged, right? Like next time your friend is just like letting it rip, instead of trying to fix it or solve it, could you just say to them like, wow, like well purged, and just celebrate the release. And just having that little tool in your back pocket can help you from trying to like minimize someone else's pain because it makes you uncomfortable.
Exactly. Which is basically why I became a doctor. Yes.
Me too. No, I'm teaching the world to meditate because I'm very codependent. Like if everyone else is happy, then I can be happy.
So a safer place. The meta. So good to connect to you women, and we'll obviously make sure everybody has what they need in the show notes.
Yeah. And if I may, I'd love to just invite people to this event called Magic Maker, because it's going to be like a time to practice these tools, and it's free. And we're going to move through this formula of visualize, alchemize, magnetize. And this is like our big global debut of Ziva Magic. So if people are curious, they can just go to zivameditation.com/magic. And I'm just like everything we've said, feeling your feelings, the safety, the science behind this, the history behind this. We're going to be covering this all at this free event called Magic Maker. So I'll send you a link, and I'm just stoked to be birthing this baby I've been gestating for 4 years. 4 years is a long time to be pregnant.
Oh, yes, I get it. Amazing. Thank you, woman.